This is a key to the worksheet on slope. So number one, you have a line has a positive slope, and does this line rise or fall as you go from left to right? And so you want to use the word rise or fall in the blank. So if we and we're going to answer one, two, three, and four. First of all, by reviewing something from our lessons. So we have this line, and as I go from left to right, you notice that this line is rising. All right, some people will say the word increase, or if it goes down like this, if it falls, some people use the word decrease. All right, I'm going to just stick with the word rise for this. So as I go from left to right, my line is rising. Okay, and to look at this in terms of slope, I want to remind you that the slope, and this is some for slope, lowercase m, is can be defined as rise divided by run. Okay, rise divided by run. And so I'm going to use the idea of rise over run here. And so to use rise over run, first of all, I need to pick 2 points on this line, and I want to pick points in which the points lie on one of these intersection of those grid lines. So that way I'll have integers as coordinates of my point. And so I'm going to go ahead and pick this one, and let's go ahead and pick this point here. All right, so to talk about the idea of slope, I'm going to have to look at 2 points on that line. And so it does not matter which of these points you start out with. I'm going to start with this one right here. And I want to go from this point to that point. And I can only rise or run. So rise, when you think of rise, that's a vertical movement going up or down. And when you think of run, that's a horizontal movement going right or left. All right. So to get to that point, I'm going to have to make some movements vertically or horizontally. And so to go from here to here, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I went up 6 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my rise, since I went up, it's positive. If it had gone down, it would be negative. So that's a positive 6. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to make a horizontal movement to that point. So I'm going 1, 2, 3. Now, since I went to the right, that's going to be a positive movement. If I go to the left, it would be a negative movement. So it's a positive movement of 3 units. And so 6 divided by 3 is a positive 2. So notice that this slope is positive. All right, so what that means then is that if the slope is positive, then as I go from left to right, my line rises. All right, and if I look at this one, so notice that as in this particular case, as I go from left to right, my line is falling. And some individuals, some people will say the line is decreasing. All right, so meaning that as you go from left to right, so as your x value increases, your y value decreases. So that's why they use the word decreasing. Same thing here. As you go from left to right, so as your x values increase, your y values, so notice all of these y values are becoming more positive. So they're increasing. All right, so we're going to go ahead though and just use the idea of, in this case, it falls. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the idea of rise over run. Okay? All right, so I need to pick 2 points on this line. So let me pick 2 points where the line intersect, or the line goes through the intersection of one of those, the intersection of those grid lines. So that way I don't have to estimate my movements. So this looks like a good one here, and I need to pick another one. So let's say this one right here. All right, so it does not matter which point you start out with. I'm going to use this one this time, the one that's above the other one. Because in this one, remember, I used this one first. So I went from here to here. This time I'm going to go from here to here. Okay? All right. So we're going to do rise first. Remember, rise means a vertical movement. So to get to this point, I'm going to have to go down, right? I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's another 6. So that's a negative 6. Now, negative because I went down. Okay? All right, so I went from here to here, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I need to get to this point, so I'm going to make a horizontal movement. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so since I made a horizontal movement to the right, it's a positive 4. And then I'm just going to go ahead and reduce this. So that's a negative 3 halves. So, but in particular, though, notice that the slope is negative. Slope is negative. And so therefore what I found is that as I um, um, if my slope is negative, then what I found is that as I go from left to right, my line falls. Or another way to think about this is as the x value increases, my y value decreases. So that's why some people will say the line decreases, meaning that those y values are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. All right, and then if we look at this horizontal line, and using the idea of rise over run again, all right, rise over run, and I'm going to pick 2 points, this point and this point in that line. All right, so I want to go from here to this point, right? Now remember, I got to do the rise first. So rise means going up and down. But notice that to get to this point here, I don't have to make any movement going up or down because it's at the same horizontal level as this one. So since I did not make any movement going up or down, then my rise is 0. Okay? And to go to this point now, I'm using the idea of horizontal movement. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 0 divided by 8 is 0. So the slope is 0, right? So the slope is 0. And so it turns out that if the slope is 0, if the slope of a line is 0, meaning it has a slope, the slope is 0, then the line is horizontal. The line is horizontal. Okay, and so finally, one of the things you also learned in the lessons is that if you have a vertical line, I'm going to go ahead and pick this point and let's say this point here. Okay, and we're still going to use the idea of rise over run, rise divided by run. Okay, so to go from let's start at the bottom point. So to go from here to here, I am going to have to make a vertical movement, right? So I'm going to go vertically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a positive 5 since I went up. Now my run, so I'm at that point, I'm done. I don't have to make any horizontal movement. So there's no horizontal movement. So my run is 0. But remember that you cannot divide by 0. So 5 divided by 0 is undefined. All right, and so what we can say is that the slope is undefined. But what does that mean, right? What does that mean for the slope to be undefined? All right, so a couple of things. First of all, it means that there is no slope. Okay, so this line has no slope. Don't confuse no slope with a slope of 0. So this line, a horizontal line, has a slope. That slope is 0. A vertical line has no slope. All right, so when you think of a vertical line having no slope, there's no horizontal component to this rise over run. So that's 0. All right. So then what we can now say is that lines with no slope are vertical lines. Okay. All right. So therefore, let's quickly answer questions 1 through 4. Okay. So a line has a positive slope. Does this line rise or fall from left to right? Well, we saw that if a line has a positive slope, the line rises from left to right. So I'm just put the word rise here. All right, so rise. So the line rises from left to right. And if it has a negative slope, like this one did, the line falls as you go from left to right. All right, so the line falls. Okay? All right. And then number 3, a student uses slope formula to find the slope of a line. The student ended up with the following fraction, -8 divided by 0. Based on the calculation, based on this, does this line have a slope of 0 or no slope? All right, well, that goes back to what we talked about, right? So, so a vertical line has no slope because remember that fraction is undefined. A horizontal line has a slope. It is 0. So going back and answering this question then, you have 0 in the denominator, so that's undefined, right? So therefore we have to say no slope. All right? And then a line with no slope is a line that is horizontal or vertical. All right, well, we talked about that in this one here. So a line with no slope are vertical lines. We're going to use the word vertical. Okay. All right, so number 5, you want to use a slope formula to calculate the slope of the line containing the pair of points. All right, and it says you must show your work to receive all points. Don't just indicate the slope. In other words, don't just put an answer here, and make sure you show the work. Make sure I can read it and it's mathematically correct. All right. And also, if the slope is a fraction, leave it as a fraction, but reduce. Don't write as a decimal or a mixed number. Just leave it as the idea of that rise divided by run. Okay, so the slope formula we're going to use, though, is this. So when you have two coordinates in a plane, we're going to say, remember the idea of rise over run. Let me go ahead and kind of write it on this, just so you to remind you. All right, so we have two points in a coordinate plane, and we're going to call this first point right here x sub 1, y sub 1, and we're going to call this second point the x sub 2, y sub 2. So this meaning the x coordinate of my first point, the y coordinate of my first point, x coordinate of the second point, y coordinate of the second point. So all of this was in the lessons in the class we talked about this. And I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line here. Okay, and so we saw that the slope, remember the slope is rise over run, which can also be thought as the change in y divided by change in x. All right, and change in y means the change in y coordinates. So you can subtract, change being subtraction. So you can subtract your y coordinates. And we're going to start with y sub 2. So I'm going to say y sub 2 minus y sub 1. But remember, we also saw that when using this idea of slope, the idea of slope, and in particular this formula here, these symbols, if I started y2, I need to make sure that I start with x2. So I'm going to subtract the x coordinates, but the order matters. So x2 minus x1. And so that's the slope formula we're going to use. So I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to write y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So the order matters. So if I start with y2, I have to start with x2. And what some students find is helpful is that they'll label these points. So let's call this a first point. So this will be x1, y1, and this will be x2, y sub 2. And then just plug and chug, right? So you're going to take these numbers, plug into the formula. So then we're going to say slope equals. And so this is the work. You're going to say a -8, subtract 4. So y2 minus y1 divided by, and then x2 to subtract a -3. All right, so you had to show that. Then you can simplify, and you can go from here to the answer. Some of you can do that, but let me just go ahead and, now this I had to see. All right, so remember, you got to show your work to get some points, to get all your points. So I need to see this. And then you could say at this point, this is going to be a -12, -8, and a -4 is a -12. 2 subtract -3 means 2 plus a +3, so that's 5. And so you get, and it cannot reduce this, so you get -12 okay? And over here, do the same thing, x1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And so the slope then, so I needed to see, -7 subtract a -2 divided by, and then remember we start with -7, so I've got to start with 4. 4 subtract 6. All right, so I had to see that. And then you're going to kind of simplify this. So this part I needed to see, and then you can just write the answer. But in your mind, you're saying negative 7 subtract negative 2 means negative 7 plus 2, right? And then 4 subtract 6. And so negative 7 plus 2 is a negative 5. 4 subtract 6 is a negative 2. And I know that a negative divided by negative is a positive. So you had to say in your answer, you had to say positive 5 halves. Don't say negative 5 divided by negative 2. You at this point in your mathematical career, you need to remember that a negative divided by negative is a positive. So you need to indicate that. And so that's it. All right. So that is the key to this worksheet.